can the convenience we gain out of a lot of these capabilities, we have to realize and just recognize we're giving something up. Hey everybody, welcome back to cisolife. I'm Brian Haugli with SideChannel. You can follow us anywhere on social media land, hashtag cisolife, obviously sidechannel.com. We do a lot of fun stuff on LinkedIn. This is a new series that David and I are kicking off with our marketing lead, Lauren. She's off camera. She's going to be joining us in a second. And we wanted to start bringing about a more robust conversation about topics that are happening around cybersecurity, privacy, and risk management. And David and I thought, why not just have the two of us start going over some of these topics? And hey, you know what? There's enough of them out there, but let's add one more podcast to the pile. So I'd like to introduce David Chasteen. He's Executive Vice President at SideChannel. He's joined me. We've been working together for a number of years. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Met Brian a number of years ago when I came into SideChannel and was a fractional CISO for the firm for a while, and then ended up becoming a partner and helping kind of figure out where we were going strategically. I've had a number of side jobs during that time period, other than just being the CISO at GoFundMe. I've also been the CEO of CyberLock, and we actually just merged the two companies recently. And then I have a bit of a side hustle. I do sometimes write and produce for television as well. And so that is a fun thing that I get to do. And yeah, that's what I got going on at the moment.
And not to blow up your OPSEC, but you just recently left the San Francisco area and are now residing in New Mexico and enjoying a new residence. How is
That's right.
How is that out there?
New Mexico is fantastic. I love New Mexico. We've got a lovely adobe house here, kind of at the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and 20 minutes from the ski mountain. And I'm also a pilot, and so we're able to fly the Cessna around and stay pretty mobile. And we love it. San Francisco was great, but it was time for, I think, a lot of folks in the pandemic, rebooted and tried new opportunities and locations. And so far, that's going great. We love it out here.
Lauren joins us, and Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I recently joined SideChannel as the marketing lead. I am super stoked to be working with all of you smart people, and really excited to kick off today's conversation. Yeah, so full disclosure, everyone, I am not technical. I have been just very interested in the conversation about data privacy, sort of through the context of what's happening in the courts. So I read an article this weekend that Gizmodo published on Saturday, and it's about companies knowing that when people are pregnant, sometimes before like family members get to know, and some of like the closest people to you get to know. So the article references this New York Times story that was published about a decade ago, where a statistician who was working for Target was tasked with inventing a new way to identify potentially pregnant shoppers, even if the shoppers didn't want the company to know. And the rationale for this is, of course, right, there's a lot of money in the mommy market. And so Target wanted to be able to personalize the promotions and coupons that they sent to those shoppers to incentivize the purchases that they would have been making anyway as they navigated this part of life. So I'm going to read from the article now. The story, this is about the second paragraph, and the story goes, after crawling through the freight of sale data from statewide shoppers on Target's public baby registry, he came up with a pregnancy prediction score that the company then assigned internally to each of its regular customers. If you believe the rumors, not everyone does, Target's algos were so accurate that the company sent coupons for cribs to a teenage girl before her own father even knew she was due. A decade later, the story reads less like a quirk of capitalism and more like an ominous sign. Now it's not just Target. Every company is hounding you for data. And thanks to the Supreme Court's decision to overthrow Roe v. Wade, a good chunk of the nation's police and private citizens can go after people seeking abortions and the doctors that would serve them if there's enough evidence. And so I'm curious on both of your thoughts about, data privacy. In 2022, we know that there's a lot of data to go around. and lots of people willing to pay for it. So I would just love to hear from y'all, like what normal people do if they don't want their data specifically like out there like this.
What does privacy mean for an individual? It's a tough case because there are people who are using platforms who know full well that they're giving up their information willingly, but don't seem to care about it until it kind of bites them in the ass, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other folks out there who are just like, I don't want any of my data out there. How do I get around my data being part of this? But let's take the Target example. I had a really, as we were kind of prepping for this, I had a very interesting thought about, a statistician came up with this idea at a corporation, access to the data that the corporation had, and then basically built a business process to then enable sales. Okay. Where was the security team? Where was the general counsel? Where was legal? Where was HR in all of this? Where was the PR team that knew if this thing backlashed, they were gonna have to be the ones standing out front going, actually, it's not as bad as y'all think. We swear. But so like, I'm curious, here's a great example of obviously different silos not working together. Someone running with a business process, right? And I get it. Corporations need better business processes. They want to enable sales, but you need to kind of factor in all the other elements. So like my thought about this initially when we were talking about this was like, where were the other teams? Did they get to weigh in? Right? I mean, actually, if you kind of look back a little bit, Target doesn't really have the greatest track record, for protecting customer data. So, was this around that time? Was that back around 2011, 2010, like early 2010s was when they had that credit card breach? They've obviously gotten better since, but I mean, come on. I don't know, David, what are your first, like, let's just pick off this. Like, how do you look at, like, where were the other teams involved? Who would you have had involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think this is one of the, I think writ large, I'm sure this is going to feel very random, but this often makes me think about Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry's former, he's a poet and a farmer, and he's one of the founders of like the local food movement and modern environmentalism. He's been writing, in this capacity since the 70s. But one of the things he talks about is, one of the problems that we're dealing with is globalization and kind of the fractalization of responsibility. They say, if someone brings you a PowerPoint slide and says, we're going to dump this pollutant, in the river where your factory is, but you live in the town where the factory is and your kids swim in that river, you're going to be like, no, we're not going to do that because the consequences are immediate. Similarly, like, if you're going to we're going to lay off half the staff, and all those staff are your neighbors in the city where you live. And that's like your kid's like Sunday school teacher. It gives you pause, there's the consequences are tied to your actions in a more direct way. And one of the problems with international corporations, the larger they get, we can say, well, where were the teams? Why weren't they collaborating? I mean, the job of a corporation is to enhance shareholder value, externalize costs, as much as possible, and find new ways to do that, to redistribute wealth to those shareholders. And I think that, this is what corporations are designed to do. Take the downsides, take the risks, try and move them out of the way, take the opportunities for profit and move them to the fore. And that's how the software is programmed, is to just kind of maximize that and to outsource risk, outsource consequences, outsource things like pollution on people who are not who are not part of the company, don't have to bear those costs. So it's not that surprising to me that this has happened. I think that risk is, I think the economic concept of externalities, an externality is, I think one of the core concepts that we tend to think of intuitively around capitalism is you and I agree to engage in a transaction. I'm going to buy this thing from you. I'm going to give you money. That's it. That's the whole transaction. Well, when we start talking about things like externalities, let's say I own property next to the river and you own like a leather tannery, right? I sell you my property. The externalities is no one in the town consented to all the pollution you're going to drop in the river while you're tanning leather. We've imposed those costs on other people. I've been really thinking a lot lately about risk externalities or privacy externalities, where the risk is borne by the customers. Target doesn't have to deal with the consequences of your dad or your partner finding out that you're pregnant. like that doesn't affect those shareholders, but it affects the customers, So this is one thing that good regulations do. They try to think about these externalities where those risks or those costs can be imposed on other people. This is what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission does, right? Is it says, what's the worst case scenario that this private for-profit energy company can do if they run this nuclear plant badly? Like we have a very vivid sense of what those externalities look like after Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. I think what we're going to have to do now is have regulations that think about the risks, the quasi-nuclear risks to privacy of massive breaches, like the ones that Target had, or that Yahoo had, or that the Office of Personnel Management at the government had.
Right. Yeah. We're seeing that movement, right, with CCPA first being adopted. Post GDPR, we're starting to see states create their own high watermarks and new regulations at a state level. My belief around the privacy piece, much like cyber, is the U.S., if we're focusing on U.S. kind of centric discussion, like they're missing the opportunity to have a federal standard. That to me, that seems like kind of a win, because if you're thinking about the betterment of U.S.-based companies and the ease of use and ease of consumer, I as a consumer, or I as a corporation, like, now, great, I have to do 50 different, I have to see which of the 50 standards is the high watermark, and I have to meet that, or there's a nuance over here, versus give me one standard. So great to see that that's where regulation can play in. I definitely believe and agree that having something like that in place would be a benefit to probably everybody involved who's trying to navigate these crazy waters.
I tend to think about it from like a threat modeling standpoint. I have Alexa here at home. I've got OK Google turned on my Google devices. And
that just turned on, and everybody's house is listening to this video right now.
That's right.
Sorry.
Mine just did it, actually.
See, I've heard stories of it happening from people saying it over TV. It's like there's a connection here now.
This is real. But I've had people who are like, well, you as and I didn't mention this in the intro, but I'm a former CIA officer, and that's on LinkedIn. You can look that up. That's all public now. But as a former intelligence officer, I've had friends who are like, well, why aren't you more paranoid, about Amazon listening to your phone calls or listening to your conversations for Google? And it was funny, when I left CIA, I went to work for I will not name them, a civil liberties internet organization that is very famous. And during my brief time working there, it was interesting working with those folks. There's a lot of like hacker anarchist types, and they're like ultimate paranoia. They're rolling their own Linux distribution, compiling their own code, PGP signing and encrypting every single email that they send. It's extreme, and it's cool, but
it's a lifestyle choice.
It's a lifestyle choice. The thing that was interesting to me was they were driven a lot by paranoia. And the thing I came to realize is paranoia is a function of ignorance. I was chatting with one of these folks, and they were in the DC area. And they were like, I think the FBI broke into my house because I came in and some things were moved around. And I was like, I know the guys at the FBI that break into your house. If they broke into your house, nothing would be moved.
You wouldn't know it.
You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. Which tells me, because like these are people sometimes working with like Syrian dissidents or Iranians or things like that. I'm like, it could have been the Syrians. It could have been the Iranians, in which case you should call the FBI and tell them that the Syrians or Iranians might have broken into your house. They'd like to know about that, and you would like them to know about that, But like, being an intelligence officer, I always assume someone's listening to my phone calls. Someone's reading my email. That's part of the tradecraft. That's part of how you are trained and you grow up. And you're not angry about it. You're not mad about it. You generally have a sense of who those people are. And it's like, that's the game. That's what you signed up for. But you think about that threat modeling, and you understand why that person's listening to your phone calls. You understand why that person's reading your emails. They don't care about your personal life. They don't need your social security number. They're literally wanting to know what intelligence operations you're involved in so that they can know about them. Like, that's their job, the same as us, Right. And so once you know what they're looking for, you don't really care about like, okay, whatever, they can know what I think about this new TV show on Netflix. I don't care about that, Similarly with Amazon and Google, right? I know why Amazon and Google are listening to my conversations. I know what they're doing with that data. I know what their motives are. The motive for Amazon and Google is to redistribute wealth to Google and Amazon shareholders. That's why those companies exist.
Mhm.
And I know that if they were to take my data and do something with it, take our data, all of our data, and do something with it wildly irresponsible, it would massively impact the share price, right? They have an incentive in a way that the government doesn't have, to safeguard that data, because the market forces are there in a way that keeps them under check. You look at Yahoo, and that Yahoo breach is one of the things that finally killed Yahoo. Like Yahoo used to be bigger than Google. They were dominant, and they handled things poorly, and ultimately it was part of what killed them. Whereas with the government, there's this general sense of, one, if the government does something stupid, there's no even guarantee that like a congressman or a politician is going to lose their seat in the next election.
Right.
There's very little chance anyone's going to go to jail for that. The consequences are different, and also the government can come to my house with guns and take me to jail or shoot me. Amazon and Google can't do that yet, so the level of risk is different. But I think this article is getting to a thing that's really, in the same way that we're talking about breaching or bridging the physical world and the web, right? Where suddenly you're in a physical store like Target and you got to worry about the EULA, right? If you have these period tracking apps who then sell their data to law enforcement or sell their data to the government, now my intuitive sense of like, oh, I don't need to worry about Google and Amazon because it's not in their interest to do X or Y. Well, that doesn't apply to like Steve's period tracking app, that I downloaded from like a third-party site. I don't know what they're doing with that data. And they could very well sell that data to the government, which then could do nefarious things. That's a very valid concern. So then it's a question of like, who do you trust? I think I feel pretty good about Google and Amazon because I understand the motivations there. But you look at like kind of fly-by-night third-party stuff on the App Store or the Play Store, and I think there's a lot more reason to be concerned. And then you wonder whether it's Google or Apple's responsibility to impose it's a walled garden. They're the ones saying this is a safe space. I feel like some responsibility falls on them to make sure that those spaces are in fact safe. If you download some app you haven't used before.
Yeah, the responsibility can spread across a bunch of different groups, right? You as the consumer, right? What's your responsibility? Like, I think if somebody could take away from this conversation without going, "Oh God, there's no hope out of what's been presented here. What the heck am I going to do?" At the very least, and you're worried about hiding, this type of information, pay in cash, right? In a physical store, probably your best bet. Don't use a credit card. If you are, use something else.
Don't log in with your phone number at the register for like the free, for the special deals.
Right.
There's a reason why they want you to do that.
Can the convenience we gain out of a lot of these capabilities, we have to realize and just recognize we're giving something up. And if the convenience is free, that's that old saying, right? If the product is free, you are the product, right?
Exactly.
If I'm getting something easier, right? Because I have to give up a phone number, right? Like, oh, just, I go to Supercuts for my haircut. Like, I'm sure you could probably tell. It's like, give us your email and we'll send you coupons, right? And I'm like, you know what? Like, I need one less email and I need one less thing like tracking me or reminding me that it's been 30 days since I got a haircut. Like, I'll pay cash. I'll pay the extra buck. I don't need the discount. It's cool. I made that decision, right? Because I'm in this world with you, right? Of security and privacy where I'm aware of it. But most people aren't. They're just thinking, oh, it's convenient. I'll take advantage of the convenience. I'm not really sure what I'm giving up, because the corporations, and talk back to responsibility, the companies that are providing this to you, are they clearly telling you what you're giving up for that convenience? Using a credit card is incredibly convenient compared to using cash. Why? Because if I only have $100 of cash on me, or even $100 to my name, but I have a $3,000 credit limit on my credit card, I can buy more than the cash that I have to my name with a credit card, so long as I obviously pay it back later, right? That's incredibly convenient. I didn't realize that signing up for a credit card, and go to the EULA, right? I'm allowing third parties access to my data, right? Like that is now a thing. So, okay, great. Now I got to worry about that. So you've got the processor, right? The payment processor. You've got the vendor themselves. And then Target might be, for out of this example, I've seen this elsewhere. I mean, the app tracking thing, this came up a little while ago. They're the ones who have your data, but then they're selling it to another third party who's doing analytics.
And that's the business model.
And then that analytics group is now shaping and modifying and doing what it needs to then take that data and then resell that data back to the targets and to the other ones so that they can use it from a consumer model to sell you the appropriate things. I mean, they're trying to do targeted ads, target sales, because they're like, hey, you bought this. Well, 80% of the people who buy this thing usually buy this, and you haven't. So let me show you that thing now, right? Like, that's a very, very real thing. So you've got all these different parties who are involved who are accessing this data. And you're right. It's not the federal government involved with any of this who has a responsibility outright. It's corporations who are beholden to their shareholders or to their founders or their internal team, whoever's looking for that corporation or entity to be profitable to return something. So where does the responsibility stand? Because as a consumer, you can only do so much. You can only keep paying in cash or not visiting store or not buying things for so long before you have to use an organization and give up some level of information in order to get what it is you need, right? Like it's, I don't think there's an answer for it that we're going to have today. I think we're just spelling out, I think, a little bit of what this
the nature of the problem.
Like. Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people actually even think about beyond one step or even two steps, who else is involved and where that data goes.
That's right.
So you're right. Like, some level of federal oversight, some type of regulation would need to be the thing that would step in, because none of these groups by themselves are going to go, whoa, hold up. Let's stop doing this. I know we're making all this money. Let's not do this anymore because, a 13-year-old, dad all of a sudden, saw that a crib showed up or an ad for a crib, and congratulations.
Kind of cracked me up when, they're talking about, the Secret Service deleted their text messages, about January 6th. And I'm like, text messages? Oh my God. It's like, first of all, you don't delete a text message. Like, that is still in there somewhere, and it's in the carrier,
subpoena Verizon for that. It's not
you're
that
a
hard.
law enforcement officer. How do you not know this? That cracks me. It's like, why were you using Twitter? Versus, like, if you wanted to keep it a secret, why weren't you using Signal? Also, presumably, if you're casually talking about, like, executive protection information, or even just joking about it around the president, it's like, y'all should be using more secure comms than that. Some people, the kids have an intuitive sense around this,
right.
That older folks don't. And so it is interesting to kind of think about what the future is going to look like. Are we going to have a generation of kids who are buying things in cash and being like, no thanks, when it comes to, going to the store? And if so, what are the economic consequences of that? That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. We're at the bottom of our time. And I think we went into this knowing we weren't going to solve anything today, but definitely an interesting conversation, and one I think we should continue. And, I'd like to, as David and I continue this new format, as we bring on other folks, this is the type of thing maybe we're just going to call it, we're not going to solve it today. Maybe that's the name of the new show, but let's just start thinking about it a little bit more, because I think as time goes on and as we find either new technologies or we see and can help shape government to position better regulations and laws, or even being more demanding on organizations, companies, corporations on what they're doing for not just for shareholders, but for the greater good society. Maybe that's the kind of thing and the messages that we can bring back. So listen, I'm Brian Haugli with cisolife. Thanks so much for watching this. We'll link just about everything we possibly can down below. Hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube. Follow us on LinkedIn. David, I want to thank you for being on for today. Lauren, obviously, always a pleasure. We look forward to next week. We're going to shoot to do these on Tuesdays, release them maybe on Wednesdays, Thursdays, depending on how post goes. That's always fun, but everybody be good, stay safe. We'll see you next time.